Witch hunts started in Great Britain in the 1500s. The government had outlawed it and made the act punishable by death. These events influenced the colonial Americans to start their own trials when 3 young girls were accused of witchcraft. The trials went on for a year. 20 died, and over 100 were convicted and tried. The law wasn't reprimanded until the 1950s, although by then no one took it seriously. The Salem witch trials caused mass hysteria in colonial Massachusetts, and several innocent people were affected by it, but there was never a fair resolution to those who were killed.
Prior to the Salem witch trials, Salem was full of many spiritual and religious people. Salem was a small village in Massachusetts where Puritans had started their new lives, and strange things started to happen in the village. 3 girls, Ann Putnam, Abigail Williams, and her cousin Betty Paris, were accused of practicing witchcraft, and they were brought straight to trial. The girls were being accused because their parents and others started to notice that they were acting different than they were before. They were throwing tantrums, yelling and screaming, and throwing things around their houses. When the girls started to act this way, a pastor in the village, who was Abigail Williams' uncle, Samuel Williams. The pastor had thought that these girls were practicing witchcraft, but he wanted to keep it a secret, so there wouldn't be mass hysteria in the village. Although he did not want people to find out, word got around which caused madness in the village. More people were being accused and convicted for this practice in Salem, and the jury decided that being executed was the most fair punishment if the accused was not willing to tell the court what they had wanted to hear. The choices that the accused had were to admit to practicing and be banished from the village, or deny the allegations and be executed or imprisoned. This form of punishment was unfair in the sense that people were being killed or imprisoned because they were acting strange. Professor K. David Goss stated in an interview that the Salem witch trials were conducted so poorly that it resulted in many innocent deaths. The jury had no real evidence that gave them proper reasoning to convict and execute an innocent person. Similar events took place in Britain during the 17th century when there were cases of witchcraft going on. Suspicion grew around Britain when others started to act strange, and the only reasoning they had for the actions was to blame them for the practice of witchcraft. They would hold witch hunts to execute all of the bad souls in the villages because they did not want the bad spirits to start hunting them for the actions to spread to others. While witch hunts were going on in Britain, there were 50,000 executions that happened. Although there were only 20 deaths in Salem, these 2 events that took place had followed similar structures in order to stop mass hysteria about the practice of witchcraft. The events that took place in Britain created structural impacts for the trials that happened in Salem, which helped the jury decide how they were going to punish the accused. During the events that happened in Britain, the punishments used were executions, and the jury in Salem took those ideas and used them when they convicted. They also drowned them in local areas of water to expel the spirits of witches.
During the time of the Salem witch trials, most of the populace in Salem were involved in the trials and witchcraft scenario. Once the accusations of the 3 girls began to spread and were heard by many of the townsfolk of Salem, the beginning of the accusations was a boiling point for the members of Salem as members of the community started to suspect each other and tensions were at an all-time high within the town. Many believe the Salem witch trials were only in people's minds and suspect the trial to detain witchcraft users was futile. According to Susan H. Friedman of the Journal of the American Academy of Psychiatry and the Law, to explain the girls' accusations and behavior, deception, factitious disorder, and conversion disorder have been put forward. The magistrates, judges, and other officials of Salem began taking serious and immediate action. Of those involved was also the notorious Reverend Samuel Parris of the Salem Village Church of Christ. Given Parris's occupation and the allegations of witchcraft, this allowed for him to become deeply involved within the political and the emotional byproducts of the trial. During that time period, religion and politics usually went hand in hand. If someone was convicted of a felony, they would not only be condemned by the society, but also believed they would be judged by God himself, explaining Parris's involvement in the trial. For the Salem witchcraft trial, a council of magistrates, officials, and judges was formed to properly assess the situation of the matter and to resolve the issue. Among this council were Sir William Phipps, William Stoughton, Jonathan Corwin, Thomas Danforth, Bartholomew Gedney, John Hawthorne, John Richards, Nathaniel Stallstall, Peter Sargent, Samuel Sewall, Stephen Sewall, and Waite Winthrop. All accused of witchcraft were examined and judged by this council of officials. These men dictated whether an accused was to be thrown in jail to rot or to be publicly executed by hanging. More than 200 people were accused of witchcraft and 20 were executed. 19 of the 20 people were hung on a hill known as the gallows. One of the executed that was not hung was a man by the name of Giles Corey. Rather than defend his innocence in court, Giles chose to remain mute in court, viewing himself as already being found guilty. His defiance in court was a major offense, resulting in him being torturously murdered by being crushed to death by rocks. More than 200 people were accused and convicted for witchcraft. Many of the confessions were gained through torture rather than modern investigative methods and procedures. An accused would have more than just likely confessed to being a witch just to avoid execution and would rather just live with the shame. So many people were jailed that extra holding cells in Danvers were needed to hold the vast majority of the people accused. Each execution was held publicly as a way to discourage more practices of witchcraft.
Trials came in September of 1692, when the use of spectral evidence became inadmissible, thus significantly weakening evidence against the accused. At this point, less people were accused of witchcraft due to a lack of evidence. Slowly, it had died. The remaining prisoners were released and compensated for the suffering through the event. The anti-witch law was not reprimanded until the 1950s. Although the convicted were freed, they never did receive a satisfying resolution. They were locked in a cell for months without knowing whether they would be executed or not. Then they were set free with no other explanation, and feeling as if everything they went through was pointless. The victims were compensated with money, but is that really enough? Several years of the victims' lives were taken away off a fruitless accusation and a sporadically done trial. All trials previously done in Salem were quick. In an interview with historyofmassachusetts.com blogger and University of New Hampshire graduate Rebecca Brooks, she mentioned the judicial system before the trials. Prior to the witch trials, convictions of crimes such as murder or thievery were done with little to no evidence against the defendants. Today, a murder trial can last months, even years, due to the amount of evidence they have with modern-day technology. As a result, jury officials have come a long way from how trials were conducted before. This proves how poorly the Salem witch trials were run and how unfair the jury treated all the victims involved in the trial.